Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello, and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I am Frank Capello.
And I am Rivka Rivera.
So we are recording this on Sunday, October 15th. We are in the midst of the ongoing crisis in Gaza and in Israel right now, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're not going to talk about every aspect of everything that's been going on, because this is not the place to litigate this crisis, but we do want to share how we are feeling, where we are at, and a little bit of our perspectives, because we have to be honest about it, and it also would feel disingenuous to not acknowledge everything that has been happening so far. So I'm just going to start with myself, and then Rivka will jump in as well. Obviously, everything that has transpired over the last week, 8 days at this point, has been absolutely heartbreaking, devastating, emotionally draining. I think any of us that care about human life and peace and not seeing people suffer, this has been a really intense and traumatic experience over the last week or so. But at least where we're at right now, I'm just going to read something that I had just written recently and had put on my Instagram because I was trying to articulate how I was feeling right now in this moment, a week after Hamas's initial attack into Israel against Israeli civilians. So, two things are true. Hamas's attack on Israeli civilians is horrific and the single greatest act of violence committed against Jews since the Holocaust, carrying explicit overtones of anti-Semitism and eradication, triggering the historical inherited trauma of Jews around the world, and we must hold space for this. Also, the Israeli government's current siege of Gaza is depriving over 2 million people, half of whom are children, of water, food, electricity, and medicine. The exits out of Gaza have been sealed as Palestinians are bombed by one of the most advanced militaries in the world. This is collective punishment, which is a war crime, and now brings on genocide. And I also urged anyone reading to call their representatives and demand that they call for a ceasefire and an end to the siege in Gaza. Like I said, we're not going to go, 5, 10, 15, 20. We're not going to go any years back and discuss how we got here, other than to say that a lot of what we're seeing is the result of imperialism and occupation. This cycle of violence, especially the Israeli government's retaliation against Hamas and the civilians in Palestine, in Gaza, is not going to solve this gigantic problem. If anything, we have seen that violence like this, oppression like this, only breeds more violence in the future. And the only way that we break this cycle is to, in the short term, end this siege, and in the long term, end the occupation. So that's what I have to say at this moment.
I'm so grateful for your words. I'm going to breathe. I mean, I have family in Israel. Luckily, they're all safe at the moment. To see what's happening, to see how my grief as a Jewish person, how many Jewish people's grief in this moment has been weaponized to justify horrendous actions that I can't imagine any of our ancestors getting behind in Gaza has been so painful. But I guess if, as you mentioned, I mean, in some ways I feel very privileged to have this platform where we can share things, and also useless in this moment, other than to say, as you mentioned, call your Congress people if you're an American citizen and demand a ceasefire immediately. Call multiple times a day. I have found Jewish Voices for Peace to be a really useful, well-organized group right now that when I feel in my body like I'm just frozen in time and space, but in my heart like I want to do something. They've offered things to do. There is going to be a protest in Washington this week. They're asking folks to mobilize and get out to demand that our government stop sending bombs that will kill so many children, take so many lives.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that with me and with our audience. I know before we started recording, we're talking about how difficult of a week this has been. And I know I appreciate hearing your words, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. So thank you, Rivka.
Thank you.
Or well, rather than keep expounding upon this, and I'm sure it's just starting to ramble and saying things that are unhelpful, I think we can go right to our conversation today. We do just want to give a little preface about this conversation about the movie Antz. We recorded this episode over a month ago, and it's a very, very, very fun episode that we had with Max Epstein. So if you sense the tonal shift in how we are feeling and talking, it is because this was recorded in the past. So there's no mention of anything that's been happening in the last week. Also, a couple of just quick trigger warnings. Rivka and Max are both Jewish, so we, had some fun talking about the Jewishness of the movie Antz. We also got into the Woody Allen stuff. So I only say that to say if you're not in a place where you're, ready to have a laugh about identity, or you don't want to hear stuff about Woody Allen, then maybe just skip this episode. It'll be here. You can come back to it at any time. But I just wanted to give that little bit of a trigger warning preamble before we go to our conversation.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, we're going to go to that conversation now. But real quickly, I just want to let you real quickly, we got to do the plugs. Just want to let you know that this podcast is produced by the two of us.
We perform all of the necessary labor to make this show happen.
And as we're trying to practice our anti-capitalist values, we will not be selling ads on this show. We rely completely on community support to keep the show going. So if you're able to support us, please consider subscribing to our Patreon.
For just $5 a month, you get access to our entire back catalog of premium episodes, and you'll be directly supporting this show. You can also leave us a one-time contribution in our tip jar, and you can find all of those links in the episode description in your podcast player or by going to mvcpod.com.
You can also help us out for free by leaving a rating and review for this show on your podcast player. It only takes a few seconds, and it is very helpful in boosting the algorithm and getting this show in front of more people, so we really appreciate it.
All right, we're going to take a break, but we'll be right back with our conversation about Antz with Max Epstein. We are very excited to be joined by Max Epstein. Max Epstein is a documentary filmmaker and founding employee member of Means TV. He serves as the head of content for the streaming service, where he works with filmmakers big and small to help bring their work to Means TV, as well as help produce all of the original programming you can see on the service. He's also a member of the board of directors for Means TV and was elected by membership body to serve the co-op for a 2-year term. Max, we're so happy to have you on. Will you tell us and our audience a bit about, if we don't know, what Means TV is? What does it do, and what do you do for it?
I have no idea what it is.
Okay, well, good. This is my my little pitch that I give to most filmmakers that I talk to. So Means TV is the world's first worker-owned streaming service. We're 100% owned by our workers and 100% funded by subscribers, kind of like a lever. We take no VC funding, no advertisements, no extractive financing. We've never taken like a loan or anything like that. It's been a rocky road as a result of that, but all for the greater good.
Oh, really? Not playing within the capitalist system is difficult?
Yeah, go figure. Yeah, sometimes it really feels like they have it out for us,
Interesting.
We've gotten a couple emails over the years from overseas businessmen and investors who want to like buy the service, which every time I'm like, do you know what we do? Like,
Well,
are you even aware?
Even break down what worker owned means and what does it look like for people who this is a new concept in America, right? That's very rare. So what does it mean? What does it look like?
Yeah, so it feels like it's a new concept. It has existed for a long time. It's just been out of vogue for a while. But essentially, everyone who works for Means TV or provides any sort of labor to Means TV becomes an owner in the company. So we have different membership levels. We have 3 levels. There's employee members, contractor members, and royalty members. Employee members are any full-time employees. So we have 4 full-time employees, which is one reason why I'm the only one here and everyone else is currently working, because everyone wears a lot of hats. Then we have contractor employees. So that's like anybody who works on stuff for Means TV sporadically. So for example, if you're like an editor or a colorist or a sound designer or a graphic designer or something like that, if you provide a certain amount of work for Means TV, it's like, some amount of hours of labor, then you become you get invited to join the co-op as a contractor member. And then lastly, there's royalty members, and royalty members is basically anyone who creates content for Means TV. So anytime we license a film or a TV show, or we have this thing called independent creators, which is like certain like YouTubers and stuff like that, generally they get invited to join the co-op as a royalty member. So really everyone who has a hand in the service owns a part of the service. So, there's at those different levels, contractor, employee, and royalty, you own a different percentage. It's like employees own the most amount because they kind of provide the most amount of labor and infrastructure for the co-op. Contractor members is the second amount, royalty members is the third. So, and it's different percentages and stuff like that. But basically everyone involved is an owner. And as being a part of an owner, you're able to take part in the co-op in different ways. So everyone gets to participate in profit sharing. So at the end of the year, any of the extra profits of the co-op get split up accordingly based on those different membership levels. And it's in the bylaws. It's like super technical, and it's not necessarily worth going into in depth. But it's like, let's say you make 6 episodes of a 45-minute long TV show, right? Like, you provided a lot of content for the service. So the amount of profits that you get at the end is kind of like according to that. Or if, let's say you only make like one little short video, then maybe it's a little bit less. But the idea is it's like everyone who puts work in gets a little bit out. In addition to profit sharing, we also have other membership benefits. So every member in the co-op is able to vote on the board of directors. So I'm on the board of directors. In our bylaws, there's basically different representatives in the board of directors. So the board is 5 people. It's 3 employee members. And that's because, like I said in the beginning, the employee members kind of put the most amount of labor into the co-op. It's 1 contractor member and 1 royalty member. So everyone in the co-op gets to vote on all those positions. So even though I am not a royalty member or a contractor member, I'm an employee member, the employee members and the contractor members and royalty members get to vote on my election into the service, into the board of directors. And then also there's other sorts of benefits. So everyone gets access to the service. We have things like an internal job board where people are basically able to like post different jobs that they have going on, and everyone in the co-op has access to that. So we have membership meetings, general meetings. We have committees. So for example, there's a content working group committee. So that's like different members of the co-op get together and they talk about like what the content strategy is for the co-op. We have a committee that's just based on technology. We have a seed funding committee where that's a group of members of the co-op who basically use some of the co-op's money to help like fund like early projects and things like that. So it really is like kind of being a part of like a community, filmmaker community, but just like general community. What's really interesting and what has been like maybe one of the best parts for me is I get to work with like filmmakers all over the spectrum, not just like, America, international, East Coast, West Coast, but just like all different levels of experience. Like I work with lots of first-time filmmakers. I look, like I take a lot of I have friends who like work in more traditional media companies, and they talk about, having to put on their Zoom shirts with their ties and stuff like that. I like in this summer alone, I think I've had 3 like business calls with people who are like taking them from like their vans, or like taking them like in the bathroom at work so their boss doesn't like catch them or whatever. So lots of like first-time filmmakers, lots of people who are like veterans of the industry, and that's kind of the most amazing thing. Like everyone really helps each other in the co-op, and being a part of the membership of the co-op is really being a part of like a collective of people, which is great.
That is so cool.
Fucking awesome. Yeah.
It's so moving
great.
too, because I don't know if you heard, but there's like a entertainment strike going on.
Oh yeah. I've heard a thing or two about that.
Heard a thing about it, and it's just like, we've talked about a lot of those issues, but this is the antidote in so many ways. It's an issue of workers not getting to be own their means of production, get paid for their work, and then also just it's moving to hear you talk about how inherently inside the system there's room for newcomers to come in and learn. Like there's inherent mentorship, and that's one of the big issues with the mini rooms that were being introduced, and what the WGA is striking for is that that's being cut off as a result of the greed of this capitalist system. And so within a cooperative, you inherently have these systems for mentorship, for people to be able to move up and learn about their craft and not get cut out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how we like to think of ourselves, is like really, especially, I mean, we're only, we're about year 3 and a half.
Wow.
And I would say that has been really like the main driving force, is it's sort of like a proof of concept, right? Especially in that first year, it was like, we wanted to show people that like, yes, you can build an alternative to the traditional studio system, the traditional, distribution system that is sustainable, that is, that can turn a profit. So in the first year of business, that was like one of the main goals, is like at the end of the year, we really wanted to make sure that we could, participate in that profit sharing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because you look at like a Netflix or a Hulu or a Disney or whatever, or any of these companies, listen, an Uber, right? Like, it's like all of them basically operate just on pure debt. That they like, they're like their
especially
runway.
the streamers, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like an HBO or whatever, right? It's like there's their runway for actually being profitable is like years from now. It's like, maybe if we wish upon a star, we're gonna like turn a profit this year. We were like, we need to make sure that like for all our talk at the end of this first year, that we are able to like deliver something to our shareholders, who are also like the actual employees of the company.
That's important. I don't think most people know that like that companies like that are not turning profits, and that's part of the whole like grand Wall Street illusion. That's part of, again, this whole what's happening right now is it's just a whole bunch of like BS and lies.
Netflix was operating in the red, I think, for like almost a decade. I think they only became profitable like a few years ago, which is wild. Like when you think about the reach and the scope of what Netflix is able to do.
And yet some people are getting very, very rich off it. You're like, how does it work?
That I still don't understand that. For all of the reading and podcasts I do on the entertainment industry, I'm still not sure how those people are making so much goddamn money.
Well, they need Ted Sarandos.
Right,
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's smarter and more talented than everybody. So that's why he
listen, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. As soon as I get started, like David Zaslav, as soon as I get asked to do commencement speeches at alma maters and stuff like that, I'll know I finally made it.
We could spin this into a whole just like entertainment production conversation, and I'm inclined to do that. I want to ask somebody. We may.
I think it'll fit into the film we're talking about. I actually think this conversation set us up perfectly, because we're talking systems of production. We're talking big evil bad guys. So
Caste systems, classes, exploitation, oppression. So the film we are talking about today, I don't know, would you call it a film? It's a movie.
Cinema.
Is Antz, the 1998 animated bug comedy by DreamWorks, directed by Eric Darnell and Tim Johnson, written by Todd Alcott, Chris Weitz, and Paul Weitz, starring fucking unbelievably Woody Allen, Sharon Stone, Sylvester Stallone, Jennifer Lopez, Gene Hackman, Christopher Walken, Danny Glover, and Anne Bancroft.
Wow.
Mrs. Robinson herself.
And you know what? It showed. The budget for this movie was $105 million. It grossed $171 million worldwide. So if you've never seen this movie, this is set in a world where ants live in structured conformity and are separated into two classes, workers and soldiers.
I think that's also the world we live in.
Yeah,
Like that, it's not a fake world. That is, in fact, the world that we not
Yeah.
only as humans, but also the ants themselves. Like that's not, it's not like it's ants in space or whatever.
Oh, is that how actual ant colonies work?
I don't actually.
Well,
I
actually,
didn't look that
it's-
up at all. I'm just guessing.
I did. I will be our ant specialist
Okay,
for
good.
the episode because I did, and I will let you know.
Thank you. Because for all of the research I did, none of it was into like the biology.
Oh, I got
or,
you. That was
the
actually
actual of ants.
that was the ant hole I fell into, but
Oh, interesting. There
Perfect.
you go.
So the movie follows an ant named Z, voiced by Woody Allen, an introspective worker ant who dreams of life beyond his predetermined societal role. His world is turned upside down when he falls for the colony's princess, Bala, voiced by Sharon Stone. Z then pretends to be a soldier to get closer to Bala, but inadvertently becomes an enemy of the state when he kidnaps her. Concurrently, the ambitious General Mandible, voiced by Gene Hackman, implements his plan to eliminate all of the worker ants, and Z and Bala must work together along with the rest of the ants to save the colony from General Mandible.
Just so you know, for the rest of this, I will only refer to the ants by the actor's name. I took like notes about
I
the
think
film,
that-
and I
All
was
good.
like, Woody Allen ant, Stallone ant, Gene Hackman ant.
I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, cool.
I'm not going to say Weaver and Azteca over and over again.
Right, exactly.
some historical context for this movie. Released on October 2nd, 1998. So we did Titanic, which was 97. This came out right after Titanic. I feel like we're really hitting all these films that made us.
This film is really a reaction to Titanic, if anything.
Well, we'll talk about it. Bill Clinton is, of course, president. The United States Department of Justice and 20 U.S. states filed an antitrust case against Microsoft, alleging that the company had a monopoly on the software market. The first MP3 player was released in Japan. Whoa. The TV sitcom Sex and the City premiered, and the final two-part episode of Seinfeld aired to 76.3 million viewers. Wow. Smoking
Different
cigarettes banned in all California bars and restaurants. The FDA approves Viagra, the first ever erectile dysfunction pill.
And that comes up in this movie a lot, I would say.
It
No question.
really,
this movie
really
is,
does.
is horned up. This movie is very horned
Unfortunately.
This is not a kids movie.
up. No,
No.
not at all.
And last but not least, the minimum wage was $5.15, and the median household income was $38,568.
So, Max, we start off with asking our guest, why did you choose this movie for us to watch?
Okay, so what we didn't mention in the bio is this movie comes out in October, and I feel like this has a lot to do with kind of just this. Like this fact has to do with this movie in totality. But this movie comes out in October. 2 months later, A Bug's Life comes out. So this movie is a DreamWorks movie. I think it's the first DreamWorks computer generated animated movie, right? The second
it's-
animated
It's the first,
movie.
second computer animated movie after Toy Story.
Right, second movie ever, and the second animated movie by DreamWorks. I think the first one was Prince of Egypt, which there are similarities, and I'll go into that in a little bit, between Antz and Prince of Egypt. So this movie comes out, and at the same time, or 2 months later, A Bug's Life comes out.
From Pixar.
From Pixar, right. And needless to say, there are some similarities. They're both about ants. They're both about ants who don't fit into their colony, who are sort of, disaffected workers who go through like a hero's journey and, change their colonies. And I didn't know, I did some research in preparation for this just about what the hell that was all about. But, the real reason why I picked this movie was because growing up, I kind of always was under the impression there were two types of families. There were Bug's Life families and there were Antz families, and I was definitely an Antz family.
I love that. I think I was an Antz family too.
Definitely. I remember
Life over
Antz
here.
so well. You like Bugs? See, I definitely saw Bugs Life. I definitely was,
I wish I was
in the theater
now.
for that. Yeah, now I do wish I was a Bugs Life family, definitely. But Antz for me was always like the number one. One interesting thing I just noticed watching Antz now, and watching Antz, doing a little bit of research and like seeing some clips from Bugs Life, which I also haven't seen in years, is Antz is incredibly ugly. Like the character design is disgusting. I would say the ants are difficult to look at moments. Like it looks like PS1 graphics, it's like hard angles, hard
exactly what it
shadows.
is.
It was like the eyes are like gross and
The
sunken
teeth,
in.
the
It's
human
horrible.
teeth, they just have these
Yes.
human full.
It's like someone was like,
hate
what
it.
if we merged an ant face with a human face and made it absolutely disgusting to look at?
Yes, absolutely.
Nightmare.
There's nothing charming or like Pixar-y about this movie. It feels, it's gross. It's actually really gross. But outside of that, I would say like, one of the big differences between Antz and Bugs Life, and, feel free to push back on this if you feel differently. But I always thought that Antz was Bugs Life, but Jewish. That like
Interesting.
Bugs
Okay.
Life was this one thing, and then Antz was like that, but Jewish. And maybe that's because
Well,
of
it
Woody
certainly
Allen.
makes sense that you and I'm guessing you're Jewish, Max, that you and I are like,
Yes,
we were
I am.
Antz
Good
family.
guess.
And Frank was
Oh,
like,
wow.
so maybe your theory.
And I was a good Roman Catholic, and they only let us watch Bugs
I didn't
Life.
want to, I didn't want to be too explicit, but yes, that's basically how
That's
I felt
what
growing
happened
up.
there,
Wow.
Frank.
That you had to like support your own kind. Listen, at the end of the day, it's like what? So DreamWorks, Antz, that's Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Pixar and Bugs Life is Michael Eisner. They're both Jewish, right? At the end of the day, there's Jews on both sides of this, but there's something about Antz that just feels very Jewish coded.
I mean, it starts with the man on his psychiatrist's office. Like,
Yeah.
hello.
Literally.
I mean, I'm so down to talk about that too. Max, I don't know if you were going to get to this as well, but what I think is really interesting about just that competition, and part of the reason that I think they ended up the way they did was apparent, like from what my research was, like the drama, the tea was that Jeffrey Katzenberg was, because he was a big part of like Toy Story and just this idea of like the beginnings of like, let's make
all the
kids-
90s Disney movies. So it's like,
Yes.
Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Lion King. Those are all like Jeffrey Katzenberg movies. And I guess he thought he was going to become the CEO of Disney, and they like ousted him at the last minute. Like he
Right.
shepherded in all these like successes, and they ousted him, and he started DreamWorks Animation as sort of a FU to Disney.
Yeah, with Spielberg.
Right. Spielberg and David Geffen.
DreamWorks SKG.
Yeah. And so I just think that's like interesting at the core of this capitalist rivalry. We got these two films competing, and yeah, I don't know. We're going to dig into whether this was the Antz movie of our dreams, or did this capitalist rivalry is
Or
this to
nightmares.
blame for or nightmares for the teeth the human teeth mashed inside of a giant bug's head.
Well, that is part of it, right? It's that so these movies are incredibly similar to the point where like, so Steve Jobs is one of the heads and founders of Pixar, where there's like something I read online where he like called up Jeffrey Katzenberg and basically like told him off over the phone, was like, you can't make this movie, and blah blah blah. John Lasseter, who's the former head of Pixar, who directed A Bug's Life and was like, I guess, really good friends with Jeffrey Katzenberg. He has some quote where he was like, if DreamWorks had made any other movie, I would have, basically made everyone in Pixar take the day off and go and see it. But the fact that they made a movie that was so similar to our movie, I forbid anyone from the company to actually seeing it. So it's a bit of rivalry.
This is the movie.
Yes.
This is the movie.
It
Max.
is, literally.
We have to make this movie. That's the movie I want to see, like Bugs Life versus Ants, like the behind the scenes rivalry.
No question.
Make the teeth bigger. Like what was
Well, yeah, so that's what they did, right? So they were and I don't have it in front of me, so if anyone looks this up later, please just keep it to yourself. But it's like something like Antz was supposed to come out in June or March, and Bugs Life was supposed to come out in February. But they're basically created this this huge rivalry where they knew they were kind of at each other's throats. So Jeffrey Katzenberg added 20 million to the budget to try and get it to come out 2 months before Bugs Life.
Oh, this is so good.
We gotta kill this fucking other bug movie.
We gotta kill it.
That's also so ironic in retrospect because both of those movies, Bugs Life and Antz, have pretty deeply anti-capitalist messages baked into them. So the fact that there was such bitter competition in the actual production and distribution of these movies is just that's you couldn't write that, so we have to write that.
Yeah, because it's anyone is willing to capitalize on anti-capitalism.
Yes.
But as soon as it actually, as soon as the rubber hits the road, or as soon as you peel back the curtain or whatever, you can kind of see where their true alliances are.
I'm also assuming that Katzenberg and Steve Jobs, did not pick up on or were not interested in the anti-capitalist messages of those films. They were just yeah, whatever, sure, it's a bug movie, go ahead.
I'm guessing we'll get to that eventually, but there are some big ding 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 dings in this movie that are very explicitly anti-capitalist or Marxist or whatever. And my understanding is Bugs Life is less that. It's about workers being pissed off and trying to fight against these systems that they're in, but I think Antz is a little more radical.
It has more teeth. Literally and figuratively.
Yes.
Yeah, my big takeaway, I haven't seen this movie because I was a Bugs Life family. I haven't seen this movie in 15 plus years, and I was blown away. My overall big note is this is a Marxist kids movie that is not for kids. There is a lot of adult humor, and not even the kind of double entendre adult humor where it's the adults will get it. Which there was, but then you also have moments where, Woody Allen straight up just says, I was going to allow you to be part of my most erotic fantasies. And it's that is not a kid's joke.
Or something that should ever come out of that man's mouth again.
So I read online that line was in the movie. I watched it twice, and I actually didn't find that line, but that line is from another Woody Allen movie.
Of course it is.
So the reason why and apparently he got an uncredited writing credit, or he was supposed to get a writing credit because they used that line because it's from another Woody Allen movie. So he basically rewrote the character in his own voice, I guess.
Interesting.
Which is that specific line. It's funny that you brought that one up because there's a lot of other ones that are horned up again. I said,
it's a very horny movie.
Yes, 100%. So Rivka mentioned this before, but the movie opens with Woody Allen, who's, his character's name is Z, in this kind of classic Woody Allen opening monologue, kind of a la Annie Hall or something like that, where he's sitting on the analyst's chair, being don't get me started on my job. I wasn't cut out to be a worker. The whole system makes me feel so insignificant. And it really was pulled from some 70s Woody Allen movie.
Although I was glad to see that the Ants have access to mental health services.
I actually wrote do they have access to is this free? Is there do they have to pay out of pocket at all?
Sure.
Is
this just really reprogramming masked up as
which
a therapist?
It kind of was, but
a little bit.
That's okay. And I'm not going to even apologize for this because I'm going to talk about it a lot, but going back to the Jewish thing, all the other ants are tall and chiseled and look completely different than Woody Allen's ant. They made Woody Allen's ant look a stereotype basically. He's short and swollen. It's totally it's a little it's giving anti-Semitism vibes.
It is, and not it's interesting because I was trying to figure out, I'm what is this the makeup of, because there's a very also Latino, I was oh, are these my Jewish Latinos in this
Yeah.
in this, because you're like, what is the vibe of this tribe? I can't quite figure it out, because he is clearly like the only Jewish undertone character. Like there's no one else. I guess
His
you
best friend is Jennifer Lopez.
right, who play, but like then the names Azteca, Princess Bala, like interesting what they were going for.
But then Stallone is Weaver, you know.
And then
it's-
and eventually we'll get to Danny Glover's character, Danny Glover Ant, who is Barbados, which was
Barbados, yeah.
Barbados. Yeah, there is some. They didn't go too deep with the names. Let's just say that.
No, this is still very much the point in movie history. It was like, oh, Jennifer Lopez is playing this woman, this aunt. Let's name her, I don't know, Azteca, something.
Yeah, it was like J.K. Rowling came up with the names.
But then the music, like then when they go to the bar and they have like the dance scene, they have this. I thought it was like so great. I was like, I think this song slaps. The like slow down Guantanamera. I was like, what is this beat?
I
was
literally
like,
wrote
this
that
is
exact
so
thing. I
good.
wrote, this song is sick. Okay, music note on production. So apparently Hans Zimmer was supposed to do the music for this movie. And he also did the music for Prince of Egypt, the other DreamWorks movie that came out like a year before. And he was like too busy with Prince of Egypt to do Antz, so they wound up just like farming it off to some other random person. But when I heard that song, I was like, no, if this was a Hans Zimmer like number, like that would have been sick. I mean, it was still good, but
but I don't know if Hans would have gone in that direction. That felt very like, who made who was like, we're gonna play Guantanamera, but like slow down. Like I think it was supposed to be I think it was supposed to be like they just do everything in line with one another and they don't know how to fun. I was like, I like this beat. I'm down with this with the group ant dancing. I know you were gonna get to the politics of this, Frank, which I mean we're talking all about politics, but like specifically but I just want to say before we move further, because I just got to get it out of my system. It just, the whole thing of like watching it now and being like, I just can't watch Woody Allen things anymore without wanting to puke the whole time.
Sure.
And then particularly in the context of that it's a child's movie that is extremely horny is like absolutely fucking disgusting. Like the whole time I'm like, this is so gross. And so just gonna say it, gonna put it out there. Still headlines. I mean, there's still things to appreciate, but it's like, bleh.
I tried to like pick up on anything that could be like, oh yeah, this is a parallel to Woody Allen's actual life and he's obsessed with, you know, like young ants or whatever. I will admit I was not able to draw any of those conclusions from it, but I did try.
I think just like the general, when you watch his, and I'm not making, I mean, this point has been made, but a lot of like the characters he plays and the stories he plays, it's like, I'm just, little old innocent me, I'm disgusting. You wouldn't want to, I'm harmless. I'm harmless. And yet the way he goes after Princess Bala and like when he is not harmless, you know what I mean? He has a lot of actually kind of like he
kidnaps her.
He kidnaps her and his approach is, there's something very, predatory about his approach in all his and it's always masked by I couldn't do I'm just a little insignificant
like who me no I would never come on.
Yeah, so I guess that was like for me, I was like, oh, this is kind of and just the fact that you're like, oh, me saying sexualized things in a kids movie, what's the problem? I'm like, the problem is you're a fucking predator.
Literally, yes. And this is also this is like kind of in the heat of the Woody Allen drama, right? Like this is, I think so. It's
I don't know
definitely
I don't know if accusations have come out yet.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I feel like this is around the time where people kind of were talking about it. They knew about it, but no one was actually trying to hold him accountable in any way. It kind of like similar to Harvey Weinstein, where it's like, oh, we all know that Harvey Weinstein is an absolute fucking monster and a rapist, but like, we don't really, we talk about it at parties, but other than that, we don't do anything about it. I feel like
this is when they were actively ignoring it.
Yeah.
Like, gross. I fucking hate it here. That makes me so angry. But now that, we've said that, that's there.
Now back to the class politics.
Which it's not separate from.
It's not separate from. It's all linked. It's all intersectional. So when we're introduced to this colony, like we said, it's workers or soldiers. None of the ants have a choice in what caste they're going to be put into. There's a great scene where like the queen is giving birth to a bunch of like larva ants, and they're just like, handing them to one, and there's like worker, soldier, and they just put like either a pickaxe or a soldier's helmet. When we meet Z, he describes the rest of his ants as mindless zombies capitulating to an oppressive system. When we meet his best friend Azteca, she says, "I love my work and you think too much." So like just they lay it on really, really thick that like this is like an exploited class that has no choice in how in their class position or how they are exploited. And then we also learn that they're the soldiers. So his best friend is Sylvester Stallone, who's Weaver. He's one of the soldiers. But yeah, this is like a story of, I don't know, like communist revolution, of socialist revolution, of class consciousness. I was really blown away by the movie's politics. There were a couple things here and there that I like quibbled with, mainly on its like themes of like individualism and how it's saying like, oh, individualism is so good, but we'll get into that.
I feel like it actually hit you over the head with the individualism a little bit.
Definitely. Which is also, yes, you're right. However, I would say Bug's Life, it's like that 10x. Like it's much more about like, oh, the answer to all of this is individualism, as opposed to, and not to give away the ending of Antz.
No. They pressed play on the podcast.
Spoilers. Yeah.
Good. I do think, at the very least, the moral of Antz is just kind of like, well, it's not all about individualism. That you do kind of need to like, link arms and become the wrecking ball or whatever.
They do. There is that collectivist moment at the end where like the ants, where all of the worker ants are about to drown, and then they come together to build this giant ladder. I guess I just wanted like, you can't do it in a kid's movie like this, but I guess I just wanted one ant to be like, individualism is good as so far as we are all individuals and we respect like each other's existence as individuals, but we are all part of a greater collective and we must work together at times while still honoring like your individual aspirations and goals and lives and priorities, but still taking into account like the larger societal responsibility that we have to one another. Like no one was going to say that, so I guess.
No, I was just going to say this is my in to just pull out my science notes, because the thing is, what you just said is a lot closer to the scientific truth. And like when you see ants, like you don't like, sometimes we'll see them and they're like ants go marching and they're all in line. But often when you see ants, they're like totally you're seeing Princess Bala and Z, like, you see ants off on their own and you're like, what is this little ant doing all the way over here all by himself? Or actually herself, because again, another thing they got wrong. Most ants are women, okay? The men die off after, like the men are actually in these societies to help reproduction. Most of the worker ants are women who can't give birth, and obviously the queen. So like, again, a missed opportunity here. This should be a matriarchy. I don't know what all these men are doing in this movie.
Damn.
They wouldn't be there. It's not scientifically accurate.
So real male ants are just like, they're there, they're fucking, and then they die. That's it?
As they should.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds
like a dream.
And okay, so, and the other thing is like, a lot of ants, the organization, which is inherent and which is there, is like pretty incredible. The way there is no fucking leader, like there is no military man telling people what to do. There's obviously, that was the human part of it, but there is no leader. It's total collectivism. It's astounding. They get information collectively about what they should do based on environment and like what is best for the collective, and they get that through scent. I'm going to butcher like all the details here, but essentially like they'll be able to go around, smell their friend, know what that person's job is based on scent. And the scent stuff has relationship to environment. So will change, but they're not just, there is a lot of individualism within these colonies, which is why ants are not always together. You see them off on their own little adventures. So that's my other thing, is I think it's totally valid. The science supports what you're saying, Frank, that like, that this is wrong. They're doing the ants wrong there. That
they have their individual existences, but also are part of a greater organism.
Yes.
Essentially.
Right.
As it should
and
be.
I think when Jennifer Lopez Ant, aka Azteca, I think when they introduce her character and, Woody Allen is like kvetching to her about whatever, she says something like, after all, it's not about you, it's about us. Like she does, and it's giving some Bernie Sanders a little bit there.
Well, you know who I loved in that moment was Cutter Ant, or I guess that would be
Christopher
Walken Ant.
Christopher Walken Ant. I thought had the best turn in that regard because Christopher Walken Ant at the end. So Christopher Walken Ant is like the second in command to the really evil general, and he's just taking orders
to Gene Hackman Ant.
General Hackman.
And but he has this turn at the end where he's gonna like, he's the one who's gonna like cut Z down. Z is like hanging off of something, is about to go. They honestly should have just let Z go.
In retrospect,
there's a lot of death in this movie. It would have been out of pocket. Like it's a pretty violent movie.
Well, and another thing that ants do, ants will sacrifice themselves for the colony. Like they'll make that choice to sacrifice themselves. Ants are so cool. So Z's about to die, and Cutter's big turn is like, he's like, I'm doing this for the colony. And he's like, don't you see, we are the colony. And then he has a turn, and he basically doesn't end up. He's like, oh yeah, we are the colony. Like he's the one who has that realization that like the colony isn't a single person. The colony is.
Give me a hand.
See, you let go. Don't you understand? It's for the good of the colony.
What are you saying? We are the colony.
Cutter. What are you doing?
Something I should have done a long time ago. This is for the good of the colony, sir.
You mentioned Sylvester Stallone Ant. I would say that was Uncanny Valley and how they made him look like they made that ant look like Sylvester Stallone. Like it was crazy. Like they put all of that whatever you said in the beginning, $140 million. I would say at least a third of that went into like making sure that ant looked like Sylvester Stallone, and he was damn handsome.
And this was before mocap. This was like
I was gonna say I kind of want a live action Ants. I think there should be like live action Ants the musical. Like let's just full on
Ants the musical. I would love that,
and get them all at the ages that they currently are at to play them.
Roll it back.
Although no Woody Allen.
Yeah, who would they, if they were going to recast, who would they recast that character
That's a good
as Z?
question.
As Z. Yeah, who's like a young Woody Allen? Timothy Chalamet. No, I'm just kidding.
They would, though. They fucking would.
No one is pitching themselves as a young Woody Allen anymore.
Okay, some agent is pitching their client as a young Woody Allen. Like, don't
God.
that, like, someone is in a room doing that.
And then their younger assistant is like, hey, Mark, you really shouldn't be pitching John like that anymore.
Yeah, furiously texting them, like, stop saying that, stop.
They don't care. Like, he's never, like, he's fine. Like, that's what's so annoying.
I mean, one of, like, the big and, like, very drastic differences between this and A Bug's Life, and why I think this one has more teeth to it, is, like, in A Bug's Life, the grasshoppers are essentially the stand-in for the ruling class. They are, they're taking the surplus value that the ants are creating there. It's a very simple, like, the ants pick all of the food and the grasshoppers take all of the food. In this one, it's just ants, and General Mandible, Gene Hackman Ant, is a fascist. Like, this is, like, there's no two ways around it. He is doing fascism. Like, the whole climax is built around ethnic cleansing. He is like, I'm going to kill all of the worker ants because I think that they are weak. I'm also going to kill a bunch of the soldier ants who I think are loyal to the queen. So he's also doing a coup in the middle of all of this, which I was blown. Again, this is not a kid's movie. At some point, he sends all of the soldier ants to a battle against the termites, which is very violent. It is like a violent war scene. And like the termites are spitting up acid all over the ants. The ants are like fucking melting. They're like stabbing one another. I was really taken aback by like how far this movie was willing to push it on the villain front in like straight up like we're doing a genocide here.
So it's all of the, so for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, basically Woody Allen's ant meets the Sharon Stone princess ant like at a bar where Sharon Stone is like the princess, and she basically is like, hey, what if we like pretend to be poor for a night, and like they go to the bar and like we're gonna pretend to be poor and like mingle.
Very Titanic. Very Titanic.
Titanic. I literally wrote that down. Yeah, it's very Titanic. It was So, he meets her at the bar, and then she kind of has her, leaves her glass slipper or whatever, and he has to, he's like, I need to go see this girl again. Again, very horned up. So he convinces Sylvester Stallone, Ant, to switch places with him. Sylvester Stallone is a soldier. Woody Allen is a worker. He's like, hey, what if I pretend to be a soldier and you pretend to be a worker? Because he hears that there's going to be this big, soldier parade where all the soldiers are going to get to, see the queen or whatever. And Sylvester Stallone, to the horned up thing, he's basically like, okay, I'll help you, but only if you introduce me to some girl ants that I can sleep with. He's like, are there any cute girls that I can meet or whatever?
Yeah, the worker girls. Yeah,
yeah, I hear they're a lot better or whatever. So
no, but those are career ant girls. That's what he says.
They are. Yeah, it's a 9 to 5 basically. So all the soldiers line up like stormtroopers, very Nazi like, and like Frank said before, it's like General Gene Hackman, and who's the leader of the army or whatever, is giving this Heil Hitler speech. So in the line, as they're about to get marched out to this termite brutal bloodbath, literally. I actually wrote down that it when it goes into that war scene, it was very much Saving Private Ryan.
Wow.
Where it's all of a sudden it's just boom, 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 it's horrible bloody thing, and in the when they're all lined up, Woody Allen basically befriends one of the other soldiers who's Danny Glover is an old weathered soldier ant, and Danny Glover's character, incredibly disgusting to look at, horrible sunken cheekbones, it was difficult to look at. There's this horrible bloody bath, and this was part actually stuck with me through childhood, and when I watched it I had a visceral reaction, is during this termite battle, Danny Glover gets beheaded in a horrible way, and then Woody Allen picks up his dismembered head, and Danny Glover he's says these final words to him, and it was it's so traumatic. I mean, it's really horrible.
It's just his head. Yeah, it's wild.
And already, and like I said, the character design is already disgusting, so seeing the head dismembered from the body is just tenfold worse. It's so bad.
They really missed out on the opportunity to have Danny Glover Ant's head to say, I'm getting too old for this shit.
Oh man, absolutely.
That would have been why didn't it was sitting right there for him. And
we should say, this is a good point to say, that Danny Glover, workers' rights king. Danny Glover, long-standing unionist, long-standing, fighting on the right side of history or whatever. And I would say not that I had any involvement in this movie, but one regret is that they didn't give him a little bit more screen time, or because he's
one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though they gave him a sort of racist name, it was still a great character.
So I did a little research into the screenwriters specifically, because I was someone here has read Marx, because there are, and I'm going to play a clip in a minute that will prove that, or at least demonstrate it. But so it was Todd Alcott, Chris Weitz, and Paul Weitz. Wasn't a ton about Todd Alcott. Chris Weitz and Paul Weitz went on to direct the American Pie movies, so I don't think it was those guys.
Another horny movie.
Yeah, another very they're responsible for the horniness for sure.
No question.
But then digging into Todd Alcott, who doesn't have as big of a screenwriting career, he's also a comic book writer and an indie music enthusiast and an artist. So I have to assume he just has more of a grungier vibe. So I have to assume, and I'm going to just ascribe the class analysis to him. So I would love to, if anyone knows more about Todd Alcott, please let us know. Would love to get him on the pod. But there's this amazing moment in the middle of the movie. So Z has kidnapped Princess Bala. He is the only person who comes back from the termite war. So now he's become essentially an ant folk hero, and all the ants are have you heard about this guy named Z? He was a worker, then he became a soldier. I didn't know that you could do that. We didn't know that. We thought we had to work.
Talking about Z? Hey, I know the guy. He's a friend of mine. I think your information is just a little... Z? Yeah, he's a worker. He used to dig around here.
A worker? That's impossible. A worker can't do anything except work.
Yeah, it's not like we got a choice.
We do have a choice. Look at Z. He decided he wanted something and he went for it.
He's not alone. I used to be a soldier, and I switched places with him.
Wait a second. You're telling me I don't have to be here?
We got a choice?
The authorities don't want you to know about it, but we don't have to work on the tunnel anymore.
It's the workers who control the means of production.
Z don't dig, I don't dig.
People, what is this, an encounter group? Let's get back to work.
Why?
I did write this down. So you said the folk hero thing, and then kind of with the help of Stallone and J-Lo, inspires like this like worker uprising where I made a note of this. 42 minutes in, ding, 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 ding. One of the ants goes, "It's the workers who control the means of production."
Yeah.
Yes.
So it is said, and that's basically as explicit as you can get for politics.
Yeah, and it's like it's innocuous enough of a phrase where I'm sure like a studio exec would have read that and been like, "Huh, I don't even know what that means." Okay, on to the next.
Like, sure, no notes. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like that is socialist ideology. That is like, yeah, the workers should own and control the means of production, like you guys do over at Means TV.
Yeah, there you go. Good segue.
So I was like thrilled to hear that jammed into this movie.
Totally.
Yeah, I wish there had been a little, I mean, again, in our cut of it, and we've seen it come, like Newsies, a Disney movie, has, I would say, stronger politics than this in terms of just like how the politics are entwined with the story. And like I wanted to know what it meant for those. I really wanted the ants. I thought the ants were going to have like a little bit of a bigger uprising, and it really spends a lot more time with Z. And I think that it was interesting watching. I was like, I could totally see watching this movie and thinking this is like anti-communist propaganda. Like I could, like that was very strong, and it was almost felt like, oh, I could see it going the opposite way, particularly because of how so much, because of Z's storyline, and Z is just like going on about wanting to be an individual. And I think they do to a certain extent, if you don't understand the nuance and the difference between like just that this is not that this is what America paints communism as. Like it is not what it is, but this is the fear.
What's nice though about the Z character, just to compare it to Bug's Life, and I think the counterpart character in Bug's Life is like Flick or something like that.
It is Flick, yeah.
It's like, Z, there is like, that character does the hero's journey and has a change. Where in the beginning, he's like very self-centered, and then by the end, like we said before, he's like, throwing his body on the line basically to like save the colony. While in Bug's Life, it's like the movie opens with him basically being like, I'm an individual, and then the end of the movie is like everyone adopts his individualism. That like the end of the movie, in the beginning of Bug's Life, it's like, yeah, I have all the answers and no one believes me, and at the end of it, they do believe him. So it's actually less about the character changing and more about like the society just like finally accepting him for who he is, which is like.
But then again, Z's last line is, I finally found my place, but the difference is this time I chose it. Like that could literally be like a American propaganda. I could just see it going either way of like, in this, capitalism, you have choices. Yeah,
it is just like by inherently by it being this like we already talked about it, like this like money grab, like there is these two different major basically the biggest media companies in the world at the time competing over what is essentially the same IP. It is propaganda just by like the nature of what it is. So we can only expect it to go so far.
True.
Riv, I think that's such like an interesting point and something we see often in stories like this where like, because it could be read as anti-communist, and there is actually like some writing out there. There's writing out there about how Bug's Life and Antz are Marxist propaganda, and then there's also people being like, no, this is actually anti-communist propaganda. I found one article, it's about A Bug's Life, but it's a 2022 article by Emmanuel Rincon, published by the Foundation for Economic Education. So you know that they teach good things.
Sounds CIA.
Yeah. But his piece is called How A Bug's Life Revealed the Immorality of Socialism. So I think this is something that happens often when anyone, especially like Americans, see anything that is demonstrative of authoritarianism, and they're like, oh, that's communism. They're talking about communism, which is just like wrong, because like authoritarianism is a totally different. Authoritarianism happens within capitalist countries, within capitalist governments.
It doesn't help. I think what frustrates me now that I am an ant scholar and scientist, I might as well have my PhD. What frustrates me, I think, is that ants are the most fucking, like, they do communism. You know what I mean? Like, they do it right. That just, like, the fact that they're using ants to suggest that there was this authoritarian system, but, like, they are actually communists is, like, I was kind of like, oh, that's smart. Honestly, like, parts of it, I was like, ooh, that looks like a bad version of communal living, which is what anti-communist propaganda is. So I just think, like, it's easy to see it like that.
I would definitely be reluctant to ascribe too much good politics. I'm using scare quotes. People probably can't see that though. But to, like, you know, I'm reluctant to like say that the creators of Antz were being virtuous in their telling of this story. That's not to say that they were like trying to create anti-communist propaganda, but you know, one kind of like interesting thing at the end of the movie is like they don't really offer an alternative. They don't really like say like what that's like, you know, we see all this trouble and it's like we're going to rebuild society, but they don't really tell us like what a society rebuilt in their politics or their values actually means.
Which is funny because the ants could tell you exactly what that means. Protection of community, resource sharing, division of labor. Like, they got it down. So just
to finish my ants being Jewish thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, like, is there anything, like, you might be about to say it, but beyond Woody Allen, were there any other like Jewish signifiers in the film for you?
100%. So Woody Allen, like earlier in the movie, in the bar scene that we talked about, some like drunkard comes up to him and basically starts like ranting about this like promised land, Insectopia, where all the ants, all the ants, they really paid those writers a lot for that one. You know, where all the bugs can live free and there's all this like land of milk and honey kind of stuff. Later in the film, they go to what they think is Insectopia, and this is not Jewish, but I don't know if you noticed that fake Insectopia that they find is like filled with product placement, where there's like a big Pepsi can and Mountain Dew and Slice.
Sure. At the picnic, right?
At the picnic, yes. And
not Jewish, just capitalism.
A jar of, well, there are kosher pickles. And I did write down, I wrote B&G kosher pickles in parentheses Jewish. I wrote that down in my notes. But what is, I think, even more heavy-handed is they run into wasps. Wasps, as in white Anglo sex and Protestants, right? And they run into these wasps played by Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin, which is great. And they're like they basically play those characters as like the waspiest wasps you've ever seen. Like they're like, you know, they have these like pointed little noses and they're like very uptight and whatever. Their names are Muffy and Chippy, which is pretty not Jewish to say the least. And that I felt was very Jewish coded, that like, you know, it's like these wasps are like looking down on the ants, you know, that they like they can't take care of themselves or whatever. They need like help from some, you know, service or whatever.
That's a really good point. And I'm so embarrassed to admit that like I did not realize they were doing a wasp joke. I like this is dawning on me right now as you're saying this. And you know what? That's pretty funny.
That one always stuck out for me. And another joke that I wrote down that was like, this joke is ingrained in my head as a child, is they finally found the real Insectopia and they're like sitting around this fire with all these like bugs that are kind of like stoners or something. Like they all have like droopy red eyes and whatever. And one of the bugs like takes a bite of something and is like, this tastes like crap. And the other one's like, let me try. This is crap. And then they like crack up. And I remember as a kid, obviously, and as an adult, thinking that was incredibly funny. And I was talking to, you know, I mentioned earlier that I watched some of this movie with my, tried to watch it with my like younger cousins. And when that came to that line, I like turned to my parents and I was like, oh, do you remember this line? This line's so funny. And they were like, they told me, they were like, yeah, as a kid, you loved this line. And in Bug's Life, there's a line where they go, hey, who ordered the poo-poo platter? And that was the other line I really liked, which is just to say that like, my humor has basically stayed at the same, you know, place for the last 30 years, but also, you know, the movies are pretty similar.
There's also that great line from the stoner bugs where they're like, do you ever think that we're maybe just like these insignificant little things, a part of like a much bigger universe? We don't even know how big the universe is. Love some introspective, anthropomorphic animals or bugs in a movie.
Absolutely.
I guess the only other thing I wanted to touch on was just what I did appreciate of Z as a character. And it was like a small moment, but just how as the colony is waking up, realizing workers should own means of production, and they're getting this sort of mythology of this guy Z. I felt, and like we know as the viewer that the mythology is not adding up to the sort of person Z is, like Z, or the ant Z is, that Z is still, it remains rather insignificant the whole time and kind of falls into, Z doesn't do much but just sort of like follow a girl. And then there's a part where the general is realizing, everyone's yelling for Z, where's Z, where's Z, and uses that to sort of say, oh no, we're at war because we're fighting for the colony. Like, Z's nowhere to be seen. Like, I'm your guy. I thought there were two things there. One was just how it almost got to this idea of like, you could see the myth of a leader, that like the power is in the colony, not in the leadership. Like, leaders are mythology generally. The mythology is important, but like it's important solely for the storytelling. And I just thought that was an interesting thing that we as organizers could take from that, of like, oh, what can we learn from that? The importance of story, but also being willing and ready to let go of it, and how easily when you tell those kind of stories, they can be adopted by evil forces like the general. Because a weakness, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, of just like a weakness in the collective is needing a hero. And that actually harmed them because they needed someone to replace that mythological figure that they had put on Z, and it harmed them as a group. And then the other is just that, like, the military complex of it all, that you just see how the military was just like, could easily tell people, like, make up wars, just like make up shit. Like, no, we have to do this to protect you. And the queen was swayed, and just like how easy it is to just scare people into things that are not for their benefit, but because of, I mean, in this case, I guess there wasn't like a financial component to the military industrial complex, but we know that's there. But like, it was just evil, I guess, in this world.
I was reluctant to say this because it is not an original thought. But, you know, I saw somewhere online where basically they said that in Bug's Life, it's an agricultural society where it's all about, you know, farming, and that's kind of like what the character is innovating on, is like this like way to farm more effectively or whatever, and that Antz is more about a industrialized society where you know, Antz is like, you know, I don't want to like say this is my opinion, but you know, Antz is this like post World War II society where they're you know, kind of trying to fight back against like the industrialization or whatever. And in Bug's Life, it's more about fighting against, you know, I think Frankie mentioned this earlier, it's like about the grasshoppers, who are kind of these like colonialists. But at the end of A Bug's Life, the kind of like moral is like, you know, they basically oust the colonialists in favor of the existing monarchy. But in Antz, you know, the end of Antz is they basically say, okay, how are we going to rebuild society? And we mentioned this before, they don't really give us an answer if that means, oh, we're going to go back to like the queen being the top and there being this like warlord who's the second in command or whatever. But I just thought that was interesting. Yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting way to maybe like look at this, you know, as well.
You know, look,
Totally.
I think Bug's Life is still, you know, my preferred movie, but I think I'm coming along to both of your side that this is maybe a more actual radical film.
Join the cause, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Wake up.
You got me. I'm hooked now. All right, Max. Well, this is the point in the episode where we give out awards for this movie. We got 3 of them. The first one, this goes to the character with the best politics in the movie.
I think Stallone
Ant.
I thought that he, at the very least, he did no wrong in my eyes. He, like, you see like a big change in his character. At the end of the movie, he like sacrifices himself at the bottom of this like ant pyramid as the waters are rising. His character really felt like he I don't know, he was just constantly lifting all the other characters up. And I feel like he suffered the most. Like, we didn't talk about this, but at one point he's like basically like tortured by the other ants to like give up information or whatever.
Yeah, they beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, horrible.
And then they bring in Jennifer Lopez Ant and start torturing her, and you hear her screaming. And then he's like, all right, I'll talk.
I mean, she was great too. I would also say I just like don't want to give that award to Woody Allen Ant for a whole bunch of reasons. And if it's not Woody Allen Ant, then it's got to be Stallone.
Yeah,
I'll go along with that. And then a second place for the one nameless ant who says the workers own the means of production.
Yes, ant number 3.
I also wouldn't give it to Woody Allen Ant just mainly because of Z doesn't seem to have it. Z is confused. Like
he sucks.
He sucks.
He's not a good person.
He's not a good person, not a good
hero.
aunt. The reluctant hero, and just like so on this like me. Okay, fine. I guess if I can like get the girl.
Right, exactly.
Our next award goes to the character with the worst politics in this movie.
I mean, it's got to be General Mandible. It's got to be the fascist who's like into eugenics and wants to create like an ethno state.
Yeah, I would say it's Gene Hackman Ant definitely is the bad guy. However, hate to say it, honorable mention to Woody Allen. Like,
yeah,
sure.
Even though he's the hero, despite being the protagonist, like the politics are really no bueno.
Yeah, I'm with you.
He's purely motivated by self-interest and horniness in this movie, and
Totally.
Only decides to help everyone at the end because he's like, I'm gonna drown.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, we didn't talk about her much, but Sharon Stone Ant, also the princess, also it kind of sucks too.
Yeah.
Oh, like, very, very much.
There's a scene that when they like go to the Insectopia or thing or they're trying to find it, and Woody Allen Ant starts like walking away from her, and she's like, I order you to stop, like you're just a lowly worker and I'm the whatever. And then there's the whole scene at the bar where she's like cosplaying as poor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I would say her politics are like not good, and other than like sticking up for her colony, we don't really see her like change much. Like she's always kind of just annoying
and they could have. I mean, she does have that great line where she's like, labor, what do you know about labor? How would you feel if you were expected to give birth every 10 seconds for the rest of your life? Like, there's something they could have amplified there for her, but again, it was all male writers. They somehow didn't get the memo that ants are matriarchal, and like none of this shit would go down. But I did appreciate, like, unlike at least in Titanic, you got a little bit of how Rose was being like a victim of her class, and in this they didn't really do much of that except for that line. But I guess it is pretty terrifying to be like, oh my god, I'm born to just give birth every 10 seconds,
which by the way sounds absolutely horrible. Like when I heard that, I shuddered at the possibility.
It's just like stationary for your entire life because you got this dump truck ass full of babies that are just popping out kids.
When would you get anything done?
You can't.
Okay, one small ant fact that I have to get in here is not all ants, but some ants. And I do think this is, like, again, another, like, socialist, communist, just, like, literally in their DNA functioning of ants. Not all ants, but some ants. Any ant can become the queen ant. So, like, if a queen dies, your body, your DNA can change to become what the colony needs to be served, because it's... So it's not even like you're born. It's like every ant has the potential to become a queen ant.
It's like the Dalai Lama.
Right, yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
Oh, that's where they got it from. Mm-hmm.
Okay, actually, this is a question that I wrote down. So all the ants, they have the 6 legs. In the context of this movie, they have 4 legs and 2 arms, because that's how they chose to animate it. Whatever. But Christopher Walken Ant, the evil whatever guy Cutter, he can fly. Is that
some ants
canon?
can fly.
Like, I mean, that's a thing?
Yeah, Rivka, what does your research tell us?
I believe those ants would be female.
You mean like you believe it, like that's what your research told you, or you just are
I believe I recall reading it.
Okay, cool.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm not going to stand by it, but I would bet on it.
I won't quote you.
Yeah, I would bet on it. But generally, this was like there were 2 women. It's mind-blowing. The scientists must have been outraged. It's crazy. It's not fucking true.
We could probably find articles back from 1998, like an entomologist responds to ants.
Well, you know that entomologist gets a whole solo number in our musical.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. Ants with a Z, the musical.
Ants with a Z, the musical, but it's really the making of ants. So it's really ants versus bug life.
I think this idea has legs, and that's not a pun. I really do. All right, our last award goes to the supporting character that this movie should actually be about. And just staying on this theme, I'd say like any of the women ants, like
J-Lo.
J-Lo specifically, like Azteca. would love a version of this movie where just she is the lead instead of a Woody Allen character.
100%. She was giving it all, and she like probably has like maybe 10 lines in the movie, despite being introduced within the first like 3 minutes of the movie. They really don't give her like any legs to walk on. I would say Azteca J-Lo or Danny Glover, Barbados warrior ant. I just thought that was like, he just got the rug pulled out from under him. You know, like they introduce him, he has this cool like raspy voice, and he just like, you're just like, oh man, this ant has seen some shit, and then they just
take his head off,
behead him in this brutal way.
I don't know. Mine's a little controversial. I loved Chip and Muffy. I loved my wasps,
totally.
And a wasps story, and maybe it's about them. Like, I don't know.
That's also a brutal death too.
Yeah,
another violent, brutal death when Muffy gets hit by the fly swatter.
Yeah,
and then we have to watch Chip grieve over her.
Like it's actually, I would say, a testament to the directing of the movie, where it's like you don't see it happen. Yeah. It's just like you hear it, and then you see him like holding her corpse in his hands. It's horrible, really tragic.
All right, well, Max, this was so much fun, dude. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Could talk about this movie and all these movies all day, but we got to let you go. So before we wrap up, we'd like to discuss with our guests how we as people strive to practice our values, our anti-capitalist values in our everyday life, with all its complexities and contradictions. So, and we wanted to get back to this. Like, you can maybe use this as a springboard. Tell us how your journey to Means TV and to, being a socialist film producer.
Yeah, so I have that really unfortunate gene where I can't help but work really hard. And I wish I could yes, it sucks. I wish I could just be like, fuck this. But I have a really hard time doing that. So that makes working in traditional capitalist labor force just like very disheartening. So I worked for, years in production and post-production, just like kind of busting my ass for other companies. And I worked for, like the Viacoms and CNNs, MSNBCs of the world. But my kind of longest string, and I regret to say, was at Vice News. And Vice News was essentially a documentary factory where, you're working on like a factory assembly line, but instead of making like t-shirts or little tchotchkes, you're making documentaries. And, at first when I was working at Vice, I got hired and I was working nights, the night shift, which, as you can imagine, totally sucked. And I, to this day, still don't understand why like a show like that needs 24-hour a day staffing.
Was there like a one show that you were working on, or can you?
Yeah,
not say
I worked on. It doesn't exist anymore, as with much of Vice, which doesn't exist anymore. But I worked on the HBO long form show. So it was like not like the daily news thing. It was more like long form documentaries, which I would say is even more a reason to not have 24-hour staffing. Like, you just don't need that. But I worked there for about 5-6 years, and within the first couple of days of me working nights, a buddy of mine kind of came up to my desk and was like, hey, let me tell you about what's really going on here. And he kind of just like explained like what was happening with their unionization efforts. And I basically had gotten hired just as all of Vice was trying to unionize. Mm-hmm. So that was, the writers were unionizing, production was unionizing, I was in post-production, that was unionizing. And I don't know, it really kind of clicked in my brain. Like, I got a unionization card to sign up for, and then like from that point on, I kind of was like very much embedded in sort of the unionization process at Vice, and kind of helped me take some of my first steps in labor organizing, because like the unionization process at Vice was just like totally fucked. Like, they made us vote a bunch of times, we had to do like a walkout, and then once we actually like formed the union, it was just kind of a whole contentious contract process where it was like a big battle with management to actually ratify the contract. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of like again, it was like within the first couple weeks, I was kind of just in this process, and I always felt just like at odds with management. And then it was kind of like my last year at Vice when I got hooked up with Nick Hayes and Naomi Burton, who are the founders of Means TV, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. They had originally gotten on my radar because they had made a series of these like pretty viral campaign ads for different candidates in like 2018, one of which was for AOC, which is probably the most popular one. And they had like this run of just making a bunch of different ads for a bunch of like left-wing-ish candidates in that cycle. And after they had made those campaign ads, they were able to kind of like use the buzz around those to parlay it into creating Means TV, which was like this idea of this like worker-owned left-wing streaming service. Nick, isn't here, tells the story much better, so I'm kind of just like regurgitating what the story I've heard him tell a bunch of times. But basically, like, he had this idea to make this like working-class sketch comedy show starring Brett Payne and Brian Quimby, who are formerly the hosts of this podcast Street Fight Radio. He had this idea for this show, and he went out, he pitched it to a bunch of places, including HBO and Vice, and they kept turning him down. And then after a bunch of rejections, he was kind of like, fuck it. If they don't see the vision, we're going to have to start our own network. And that was kind of like the genesis of Means TV. And I would say, like, once that happened, like, I remember this, because I worked with a bunch of people in production at Vice. It's like, as soon as we heard about Means TV, like, everything started clicking for us. Like, it was like all the buzz in my like little cubicle bullpen kind of area because like not only did a lot of us feel like we were making like inauthentic content that didn't really like identify with our politics, and now there was like this what was proclaiming themselves to be like an anti-capitalist media company, but also this concept of worker owned really like set off all the flags in our head because like I said, getting like we all were working like incredibly hard and felt like we were seeing like nothing as a result of it. Not only financially, like it's one thing if you're working hard and you're not seeing like the financial wealth of that labor, but we were even seeing worse that, like when we were all kind of working at Vice, it was like when every other week there was like some bullshit in the news, and it was getting to the point where like we were like embarrassed to even talk about where we didn't want to tell anybody where we worked because it was just so embarrassing. And it felt like not only am I not getting paid what I deserve, I'm also feel like I'm constantly getting like just like spit in my face, like they don't even care about optics at that point. And that just sucked. So whatever, fast forward, Means TV is kind of beginning to launch, and Nick and Naomi are still doing campaign ads, and a friend of mine who worked on some political campaigns in Rhode Island basically had met Nick and Naomi. He hooked me up with them, and I kind of became like an early kind of like member contractor in Means TV. And I started at first making, before the launch, like some short documentaries and stuff. I eventually got hired to edit a feature-length documentary, which became the first feature-length film that Means TV ever produced. It's called Yell Stomp Piss. You can watch it on Means TV right now.
Wow, cool.
And then from there, once Means TV actually launched, I got hired in within the first couple months as like, it's Nick and Naomi. They were the two first employees, and I was employee number 3, the first kind of outside hire to come in and join the service. And since then, it's been a roller coaster, I would say. As employee of Means TV, you wear a bunch of different hats. Sometimes you're the sheriff, sometimes you're the bartender, sometimes you're the judge. It kind of can have its ups and downs. There's lots of peaks and valleys. But, one of the kind of biggest things I've learned is just like, never even mind worker owned or anything like that, but running a business is really hard. And that has been one of the largest takeaways for, I would say, owning a business is awesome. Being able to, and I think a lot of our co-op members who are all, owners in the company and don't have to be involved in the day-to-day operations, I think they would say the same. It's pretty awesome. You get to kind of like look at the big picture and kind of give your yay or nays on different things and kind of just like see it from a little bit of a distance. But owning a business is hard, and it's, it's tough to make hard decisions and be responsible for different people's livelihoods. And, it's a scary position to be in. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I feel like I am kind of very much involved in building something that's going to outlive me and outlive, the fucked up systems and society that we live in. So
it's
been
so
great.
cool. It's so great. And I know I've heard so many people recently be like, wait, can we own the means of production in media? And it's great
The
to have
answer is
something
yes.
it's great to be like, yes, and there are people doing it and we can point them in this direction. So I'm so happy to have you share about this wonderful group and get people to sign up and join Means TV. And yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I would say, we're, we launched in 2020 and there's been ups and there's been downs. Right now, I would say we've hit a level where we're really trying to take it to the next step. We have a lot of our diehards, we have a lot of our day ones, but we really want to build this to something even much bigger. We have content that spans across tons of different genres. We have animated shows, we have comedy shows, we have documentaries, we have series, originals. We have a daily news show, which you can catch Tuesday through Friday, Means Morning News. But the only way we can build is, unlike the Netflixes, unlike the HBOs, unlike the, whatevers, we can only build in accordance with the means that we have. There's no hyper growth. And that was actually, I would say, something I really had to learn. That in the beginning, I would get frustrated where it's you see all these companies consolidating, you see all these companies like Netflix being like, we're investing in $6 billion worth of new content in 2023. And it's well, why can't we do that? And the answer is because we can only build with what our subscribers give us. So, I would say if that's to be explicit, this is our call for subscribers. We're looking to grow. And if you go to means.tv/join, we have a trial going on right now and you can kind of check out the stuff we have to offer.
Awesome. And we will make sure to link to that in the episode description. And Max, where can our audience find you on any socials or whatever? Or do you not want them finding you?
Nope. I don't want them to find me. I'd like to stay a little, under the radar, but means.tv/join. You can find me there. I would say that is where my livelihood and work lives and dies.
Awesome.
Is,
Cool.
I try to stay behind the scenes there. I try to uplift other people's work, and that's kind of my main goal with Means TV.
So cool.
Well, Max, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing with Means TV. And thank you for choosing this movie for us to watch. And I think I've come over to Team Antz. So
yes, welcome. The water's warm.
Thank you all so much for listening, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our premium episodes, which are pretty fun, you can go to mvcpod.com to find all of that info.
For next week's movie, we'll be watching the 1939 classic movie musical, The Wizard of Oz. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.